Hey everyone, as you can see I am in our garage. It's absolutely freezing in here, but I wanted to brave it today to do this video. So like everyone's garage, it is full of old boxes and old crap, but I do have some tech in here as well, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. Over the last few months, I've obviously spoke about a lot of small computers. I've talked about my Mac Mini M4. I've spoke about Raspberry Pis, and more recently I bought the Minis Forum Mini PC, which came with Windows 11, but I put Linux onto it, and that's now running 24/7. But another thing that's running 24/7, this bad boy here. This is the Synology DS923 Plus. I've had it for about 2 years and it's fantastic. I use this for backup storage, for Dropbox storage, family photos storage. It can be used for so much more, virtualization and different things. That's what I'm going to be experimenting with in the future. But right now it's limited with 4 GB of RAM. And once I upgrade it to 32, I can maybe play around with some things. But yeah, this is the Synology Nas. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, down here, you'll see that I've got this. This is an APC UPS, uninterruptible power supply, which basically means that this is charging this up all the time. And in the event of power failure or anything like that, this has enough battery life to keep this running for like 30 minutes or an hour. But it's set up with the NAS to basically disconnect, and it will disconnect the NAS. It will allow files to be written. There's not going to be any data failure with the hard drives, and it'll shut down and I won't lose anything. I won't lose any data. The drives won't fail. So that's a fantastic little piece of kit. And inside here, you can see I've got 4 bays. There's actually 2 M2 slots up there as well for NVMe, but the main thing here is we've got 4 bays for 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drives. I've got 4 18 terabyte drives, and that gives me 72 terabyte of storage, but it's about 50 terabytes or so after you set up RAID, which you need to set up so that if a drive fails, you can put another one in and you're good to go. So it's a fantastic setup, it really is. But one of the limitations is that I don't get really good transfer speeds, read or write, at this time with my current setup. But it's not actually a problem. It's not a problem with the way that I work and the way that I handle things. Now, if you let me rewind for a second, we live in a townhouse. Like most people's internet, it comes in, fibre internet comes into the house, but we're very fortunate in that the house was already wired when we bought it. We've got Ethernet ports in the living room and most of the bedrooms, and all of that goes to the pantry. And in the pantry, I sorted a patch panel and a switch. And what it means in practice is that we've got fantastic connections wired throughout the house for local connections, but also for internet as well, for a direct internet wired connection. And I've got my ASUS routers as well, downstairs and upstairs, which obviously act as Wi-Fi nodes as well. So it's really good Wi-Fi all about the place and really good wired connections. Now, there's no Ethernet connections in the kitchen. There's no Ethernet connections in the garage, which is where I am just now, which is why up here, if I get up there, you can see my old ASUS gaming router, which is actually one of the things I love about ASUS routers, is that it's very easy to use their old routers once you don't need them. Just set it up as a Wi-Fi node. You've got a fantastic Wi-Fi mesh system. It works really well, really simple, which is why I've kept all my old ASUS routers, because I can just set them up as Wi-Fi nodes, Wi-Fi hotspots. So it's a really good setup. But you might be wondering, why is this in here? When I first bought the Synology DS923 Plus, it came with dual gigabit Ethernet connections, but I initially spent £130, I think, for the 10 gigabit Ethernet upgrade, which is a very simple upgrade. You put it on the back and then you've got a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection. And that connection was awesome. When I did the initial test with this, I connected that to my PC with the 10 gigabit Ethernet upgrade. I was getting like 700, 800 megabytes per second reading and writing. That's really impressive for 3.5-inch drives. Really, really impressive. I was so happy with that. After that, I put this down into the pantry and I still managed to get those transfer speeds. I was delighted. But one of the problems with a NAS, and a common thing that everyone should be aware of by now, is that a NAS is quite noisy. If you've got a NAS with spindle drives, they make a lot of noise when they're running. There's not much you can do about that. So I didn't want it in my office. I put it into the pantry for a while. It was fine there, but the pantry is obviously somewhere where a lot of people go in and out. And I didn't want anyone to do that, to get close to it. There's a lot of cables and different things. A lot of ways for someone to pull the cord on it. I didn't want it. So I wanted it in the garage out the way, which is why I've got the gaming router up there connected to this. Now, the problem with that is that this is absolutely solid. And it's so thick that this here, connected to the gaming router up there, the router up there doesn't even connect to the Wi-Fi spot downstairs. It goes all the way to the top of the house because that's the only way it can really get good internet, a good local connection. And that's just what I have to deal with. Now, Wi-Fi 7 has arrived. It's bringing forward 10 gigabit Ethernet connections, much better Wi-Fi connections, local network connections. All of that's good, but right now that's a Wi-Fi 6 connection. And what that means in practice is that that router is getting about 700 to 900 megabits per second data transfer, maybe sometimes up to 1,000. But in practice, what it means is that I had read and write speeds, transfer speeds of 700, 800 megabytes per second. And this new setup in the garage with the router to the Synology NAS, I now get about 100. Now that obviously is not as good, and in real time, in practice, it can be difficult, but it depends on the situation. When I'm only accessing individual files or small files, you don't even notice the speed being an issue. It's still fast enough and it still feels like you're accessing files instantly. But it's when you're accessing the bigger files that becomes an issue. And I use this for backing up a lot of old YouTube videos. And you guys probably don't know this if you don't do videos on YouTube, but if I do a 15-20 minute review, I might have 40 or 50 gigabyte of video files to create that video. That's just the reality of, creating video content. You're going to have a lot of video files. They take up, it could be a couple of gigabyte each file. You can have dozens of files, hundreds of files, depending on how you create your videos. So these folders, these video archive folders, take up a lot of room, and transferring them can be a lot. And you don't want to transfer those files from your computer to the NAS at 100 megabytes per second. So when you're working with the bigger directories and the bigger files, that's where this setup, this NAS being down here, is an issue. But it isn't an issue. And the reason it isn't an issue for me is because of the setup I'm using. I use the shared folders. And if you've got a NAS out there, or you're thinking about getting a NAS and you're concerned about slow transfer rates, the shared folder might be something that works out really well for you as well. Now, a shared folder is really, really simple. It kind of acts like a holding bay. Think of it as like, a big hangar at an airport, and you put everything that's important there. You put everything that's important in your shared folder. Now, my Synology Drive folder, which is what I use as my shared folder, I've got that in my main PC. I've got it in an external drive connected to my Mac Mini, and it's on the NAS as well. So I can have as many as I want. I've got 3 computers right now with that shared folder, but I could have 4 or 5 or 6, and all of those folders are always kept in sync. So what that means in practice is that if I'm finished with a video and I want to transfer it to my NAS, what I do is I transfer it to the shared folder. And because I'm using an NVMe drive in my main PC, I will transfer those files at 3 gigabytes per second or 4 gigabytes per second. It will be instant. It will be so fast. And then in the background, the shared folder will sync with the NAS. It works great. It works great for me. And the reason being that I basically keep important files in that shared folder for a month or 2. And then when I know I don't need it, I transfer it back to the NAS. Now, there are situations where, if I've got a YouTube video for a year or 2 that's only on the NAS and not in the shared folder, I need to transfer it back to the shared folder. But what I just do is preemptively move it to the shared folder or copy it to the shared folder, and then it will sync from here to the shared folder, and it all syncs in the background at 100 megabytes per second or whatever I'm getting from that gaming router up there, from the gaming Wi-Fi node. It will sync in the background, and then when I'm ready to do the video, all the files are ready for me in my shared folder. It's a fantastic workaround, it really is. And that's the thing. A lot of people will talk about the problems with a NAS. Firstly, they are expensive. This is £500–600 with no hard drives. Then you have to buy the hard drives. It's a big upfront investment. There's no way getting around that. Do they create noise? Yes. If you're going to use 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch spindle drives, they will create noise. Will you get good transfer speeds? No, you generally have to spend a lot of money on the more expensive NAS ones to get fast, really fast transfer speeds. And even if you get fantastic read and write speeds, you are still limited by your network connections as well. But if you use that shared folder, it really does get around a lot of those problems, a lot of those transfer problems. You do have a USB connection there as well if you want to manually transfer files, but I found the shared folder to be the best workaround. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this insight into this area here. This looks like it's chaos in the garage, but this little setup with the gaming router, with the backup supply and my NAS, it's really important to how I store my YouTube videos and how I back up a lot of things and just my overall workflow. So it's really important and it's great how it works. As I said, in the future, I am going to be using this for more things. I'm going to be putting more memory into it. So that's going to allow me to experiment with a lot of different things. At the moment, it's just storage, but in the future, yeah, I'm going to be using this for so much more. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. If you have, like, subscribe, all the good stuff. And as always, if you've got any questions, please do post a comment down below. And until next time, take care.